Hey guys, this is Mark with TST Industries. In this video, we're going to show you how to install a Toce Performance exhaust on a 2007 to 2012 Honda CBR600RR. This exotic, lightweight, and free-flowing exhaust is made of corrosion-free material. It installs with ease and is available in a choice of natural stainless or black powder finish mid-pipe. Now we will have Bart walk you through the installation procedure.
It will be necessary to remove the passenger seat or passenger seat cowl, as well as the driver's seat. Driver's seat has two fasteners in the rear portion. These will need to come out. What I like to do with these is actually leave them in the seat. It makes the reinstallation a lot easier. Now we will remove the tail fairing. To do that, we will be removing these four fasteners. Now, while grasping it here, you will need to flex the tail out slightly outwards of the bike and then move it up and towards the back, clearing all the geometry here. Now we will need to remove the electrical plugs for all the lighting equipment on the fender, and also remove these four fasteners, two on this side and two on the opposite side in the same location, and that will allow us to remove the fender. We'll peel back the boot. I'm using a little flathead screwdriver. This makes taking out the plugs a lot easier. Simply pry up on the locking tab and pull the male plug back. When I get to the last bolt, I will loosen it and then continue removing it while I support the fender from the bottom so it doesn't just drop when the last bolt's out. I will now come around to the back of the bike and I will pull this fender off towards the rear and then drop it. You might need to pry against these two parts just a little bit to clear the heat shield and other geometry. So if you notice here, we have a TST Industries end cap on this canister. This is a stock canister. For completely stock canister and cap, there is captive geometry here on these side shields. That's why we need to pull back and then down. So in this next step, we will be removing the passenger peg on the right side of the bike. Need to clear the hose here. And then we will need to remove this outer heat shield. This is done by removing this one fastener down here and then pulling down. Now we will need to take out this fastener here that attaches the rear set to this heat shield. And we will also need to remove the rear set itself. We don't have to take it off the bike. like I said, it doesn't need to be removed off the bike. We just need additional access to these components here. In the following step, we will be removing this fastener for this heat shield and removing the heat shield from the bike. Now this heat shield should be free to come out. In the next step, we will be removing all the fasteners from the exhaust. On this side we have one here and one up on top of the mid pipe. On the other side of the bike we only have one, which is located opposite of this one. And then additionally we have the mid pipe to header clamp that will need to be loosened. We're going to start with this one here. This fastener will not be reused in the reinstallation. We will move on to the rear fasteners. What I like to do is support the exhaust and manipulate it around a little bit. Makes the extraction of this last bolt easy. Now we're going to ease down the exhaust because it's almost free now. We will save these two fasteners for the installation of the Toce exhaust. And now finally we will be loosening the clamp. We don't really need to take the bolt out. We just need the clamp loose so that it releases the mid pipe from the header. We'll move back to the rear section here, and at this point we will remove the exhaust. So the exhaust hangers will have to clear the heat shield here, and that'll release it to come down, and you will need to pry up with your hand here on the mid pipe while you manipulate the whole exhaust backwards. Be careful to clear all the geometry on the bike and remove the exhaust like this. Now the next step will consist of removing the heat shield from the bike, and to do that we will need to remove this fastener and another fastener on the bottom. Now here at the bottom we have one last screw holding this heat shield in. It's right here behind the brake reservoir. So we will now remove that screw. Now this heat shield's free to come out. We'll remove it and put it to the side. So now we will need to take the mid pipe and the clamp and insert the clamp over the portion of the mid pipe that meets the header in this fashion. We'll bring that to the bike. The arrangement of the clamp on the mid pipe here is pretty critical. We want to have in the position where the mid pipe goes into the header here, we want to have the bolt from the clamp in the forward section. We will now put the mid pipe onto the header. This usually takes some manipulation. I will slip the clamp up on top here to allow this portion here that's slitted to expand. And you work it onto the header until you have it bottomed out, and then you could slide the clamp over this section and just finger tighten it for now. We will take care to tighten it with tools later. We still need some maneuverability in this pipe. In this following step, we will have to pre-configure the canister for installation on the bike. We will empty the contents of the hardware bag that came with your exhaust. Using one of the 1/4-20 screws, one small washer, one large washer, we will install the lowering links onto the canister in this fashion thread it in by hand first, and using an Allen key, tighten it up just a little bit, but you want to preserve some adjustability in the system so that we could do a fine tune of position on the bike. We will do that to both sides. Small washer, large washer, screw, link in this position, small hole to the screw boss on the exhaust. Now we will need to bring this assembly back to the bike and start installing the canister onto the mid-pipe. So what I'll do here is align the mid-pipe and the canister and insert it, and this will take some wiggling and manipulation until we get the canister bottomed out on the mid-pipe. Once you have no more room to wiggle the canister on the mid-pipe, that means you have bottomed it out. And now we need to align the lowering links with the mounts for the exhaust on the subframe. We will grab the hardware that we saved from the removal of the OEM exhaust, and we will use the remaining hardware from the hardware bag that came with the Toce exhaust. We'll have the bolts that came out of the original exhaust, a large washer, and a lock nut. We'll insert the screw from the outside in. Then we will use a washer, and the locking nut should be the locking component of the locking nut should face that washer. We'll thread that on by hand. And move on to the other side of the bike. We will repeat that procedure on this side. All right, so from this point forward, we will just have to adjust the hanging angle and hanging level, making sure that this is level, and then we'll be able to tighten all these fasteners up. So now we're presented with a choice of how low or high we will keep the exhaust hanging. So this is a consideration for maybe you're going to do an in-tail taillight, so you want to have this exhaust hang a little lower. For this purpose, right now, we will not be installing that taillight just yet, so we will keep it nice and tight up against the tail. And that is done by pushing it up as far as it'll go and then tightening down on those bolts. Now the last step of this installation here will be to tighten down the actual screws connecting the lowering brackets to the exhaust. You want to get those nice and snug so that vibration doesn't back them out. And do that on both sides. Now we'll install the springs on the exhaust. The exhaust springs come with the exhaust kit. The best way to install them is to use a spring puller. So at this point, we will configure and tighten the mid-pipe clamp. We will need to make sure that this portion of the clamp does not make any contact with anything behind the rear set here. So it looks like this is the spot. Now I would just tighten that down You also have to make sure that this pipe clamp does not make contact with your swing arm in the back. So check for that. I will tighten it so that it does not rattle around, but will not go beyond that tightness because I don't want to crush any of the pipe components. And now we can reassemble this rear set onto the frame. So for the purpose of this installation, we've chosen not to reinstall the heat shields on this bike, but we recommend reinstalling those for personal safety. This is a project bike for us, so we've made that choice. And now I'll just remove the components that won't be reused. Just don't want them to rattle out. We have one shoulder washer here left behind by the third exhaust mount. I will need to remove that. Now I'll replace passenger peg on the bike. First get it around the hose. So at this point, we will be reinstalling all the equipment we took off the bike in the reverse order of this assembly. In a typical reinstallation, we would put this fender and lighting back on along with the tail section. But for this project bike, we will be fitting a TST Industries integrated tail light that goes in the tail section here, and it has the signals in the capsule, and it moves all your lighting to the back of the tail from this big bulky fender. We will also be installing a TST Industries fender eliminator that moves the license plate location to right about here. So for the purpose of finalizing this install, we will just reinstall the tail for now. If you're interested in seeing the integrated taillight installation video or the fender eliminator installation video, you can check in the Honda playlist on our YouTube channel. Other than that, we'll just replace the bolts, replace the seats, and this bike will be ready to go.